Alright, today we're going to try a video lesson with using our quizzes lesson. So this first video is going to be our math warm-up. Today's goal is to use the area model and division to show the equivalence of two fractions. So we really want to make sure that we can use division to show that two fractions are equivalent. Using division is super important and super necessary for you to know because you will have to simplify fractions into their simplest form or into their lowest term, meaning that we have to divide fractions as low as we can go. That's later on. So it's super important now to make sure that we understand how to use division as a way to find equivalent fractions. That is our goal. So for the first thing that I want you to do is I want you to count by equivalent fractions. We're going to start by counting by 3s to 24. I want you to write this out. So from 0 all the way up to 24, counting by 3s, I will start you off and I want you to write it down in your notebook. You will continue from there. So for example, it would look like 0, 3, 3 plus 3 is 6, 6 plus 3 is 9, and I want you to go all the way up, skip counting all the way to 24. Go ahead, keep going. Pause the video if you need more time, but I will go over this now. So check your work. If you are not ready for you to check your work with me, then I want you to pause until you are ready. But for skip counting by 3s all the way to 24, we have 0, 3, 6, 9, 12. 15. 15 plus 3 is 18. 18 plus 3 is 21. 21 plus 3 is 24. So all together we have 0, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24. All right. The next instruction is to count by 3/4 all the way to 24/4. Again, write this down. I'll start you off, but then I want you to write it down in your notebooks. Make sure that you have completed your work before you check your work with me in the video. Okay, so this time we're starting by counting by 3/4. So starting at 0/4. 0/4 plus 3/4 equals 3/4. 3/4 plus 3/4 equals 6/4. Remember, when you add fractions together, when we're just adding them or subtracting them, the denominator doesn't change, but the numerator does. So keep going. I want you to count by 3/4 all the way to 24/4. Write them down in your notebook. I started you off 6/4 plus 3/4 and go all the way to 24/4. Pause the video until you are ready. When you are ready, you can unpause and check your work with me. We have 0/4 plus 3/4 equals 3/4. 3/4 plus 3/4 equals 6/4. 6/4 plus 3/4 equals 9/4. Plus 3/4 equals 12/4. Plus 3/4 would give us 15/4. Plus 3/4 would give us 18/4. Plus 3/4 brings us to 21/4. And finally, we have 24/4. Now, some of you might have noticed that we are writing improper fractions here, and that's okay. That's a good thing. That means you noticed that your numerator is bigger than your denominator, which means that we have more than a whole. More than a whole. Others might have noticed that there's a pattern here. When we counted by 3s, all we did was have those in the numerator. That's great too. That's because we're adding 3/4 each time. Our numerator gets bigger, but our denominator, our whole, the parts in our whole, must stay the same. Now 1 is the same as how many fourths? How many fourths are in one whole? Write it down in your notebook, pause the video, press play when you're ready to check your answer. When we think of a whole in fourths, we should think of a whole with 4 parts. And one whole would be the same as shading in all 4 of those parts, which means that our numerator should have a 4. So one whole would equal 4 fourths. Okay, how about 2? 2 is the same as how many fourths? How many fourths are in 2 wholes? Pause the video, write down your answer, press play when you're ready. Well, if we think about that, then I'm going to draw 2 wholes this time. And if I want to know how many parts are shaded in of my 2 wholes, then I'm going to count them all as shaded because I have all 2 wholes. So my denominator will stay 4 because the number of pieces in a whole does not change. It's very important that you understand that the number of pieces in the whole does not change. If my whole is cut into fourths, that's not changing, so my 4 stays the same. Now, how many pieces are in 2 wholes? Well, 1. I'll change my color so that you can see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 8 pieces in 2 wholes. So 8 fourths equals 2 wholes. And I want you to think about this and continue until you get to 6 wholes. How many fourths are in 3 wholes? How many fourths are in 4 wholes? How many fourths are in 5 wholes? And how many fourths are in 6 wholes? Okay, so now we're going to review finding equivalent fractions, this time with multiplication, because I don't want you to forget that skill. It's very important still, even though today's focus is on division. So 3 fourths equals, okay. So what we have here is our number sentence. We know it's a number sentence because it involves the equal sign. So whenever we see a number sentence, it has to have an equal sign. This gives us a partial answer, which means it's asking us to multiply by a specific number. We can see here that in our denominator, there is an 8, which means that we need to do something to this 4 in order to bring us to 8. So 3 fourths equals 3 fourths times, and then equals something over 8. So since I have an 8 in my denominator, I'm going to start by working with my denominator. So I have to think 4 times what equals 8? Well, I know that 2 groups of 4 equals 8. And pause the video here if you haven't already, because I want you to solve this on your own and then check your work with me. Press play when you're ready to check your work. So as I was saying, I know that 2 groups of 4 equals 8, so I can multiply 4 by 2 to get 8. And when we're finding equivalent fractions, it's very important that whatever goes on the bottom has to go on the top, or whatever we do to the denominator, we have to do to the numerator. Since I multiplied my denominator by 2, I have to multiply my numerator by 2. Okay, this is very important. I noticed that some people were not doing this skill. They were not doing this rule. They were multiplying by random numbers or numbers that I couldn't figure out where you got them from. And we cannot do that. To find equivalent fractions, we have to multiply with the same number top and bottom. Whatever you do to the denominator, you have to do to the numerator. Whatever you do to the numerator, you have to do to the denominator to find equivalent fractions. Since I multiplied my denominator by 2, I have to multiply my numerator by 2. So 2 groups of 3 gives us 6. So my equivalent fraction to 3/4 is 6/8. All right, so drawing equivalent fractions. In your notes, I want you to draw the model here that you see on the screen, and I want you to shade it and color it and circle it just like they have. And again, we are finding equivalent fractions with 2/4. So even though you may automatically know the equivalent fraction for 2/4, I want to see the work. I want to see the work because we are dividing here. You must divide. You must show me that you know how to divide 2/4 to get an equivalent fraction. So I want you to pause the video and press play when you're ready to check your work. Do it yourself, then you can check your work with me in the video. See if you can use division to find your equivalent fraction for 2/4. Notice how the last problem gave us a partial answer. This one doesn't, so we have to be able to figure out what number to divide with. Pause the video, press play when you're ready. Alright, so first I know we have to do an equivalent fraction for 2/4, so I'm going to write 2/4 down. Now I have to think, I have 2/4, what can I divide both 2 and 4 by even that would go into both of them evenly? Okay, remember what I do to the denominator, I have to do to the numerator. What I do to the numerator, I have to do to the denominator. So it's one number that we have to choose that will go into both 2 and 4 evenly. Well, one trick that we can use is thinking 2 and 4 are both even. And we know that the number 2 goes into every even number possible. So if you cannot think of a bigger number to divide by, and you notice that both the numerator and the denominator are even, then you can start by dividing by 2, and that should bring you to an equivalent fraction. In this case, the numerator is 2, so that's as big as we can go. So I'm going to divide both the numerator and the denominator by 2. Whatever I do to the top, I have to do to the bottom. 2 goes into 2 evenly, 2 goes into 4 evenly, so this works. Anything divided by itself equals 1 because I have 2 groups of 2. 2 goes into 2 exactly 1 time. If we have 2 seats and we have 2 people, that's 1 group. So 2 divided by 2 equals 1. 4 divided by 2. Well, 2 groups, if we have 4 and we group them by 2, then we have 2 groups of 2. So 4 divided by 2 equals 2. Now, we know that 2/4 is equal to 1/2. And if we look at this area model and we imagine this horizontal line being taken away, then we can see that. We can see that what used to be 4 parts is now 1 part and 1 part. So 2 parts total, and one of them are shaded. Okay, so this area model helps us see this. We divided both our top and bottom numbers by 2. We got 1/2. 2/4 is equivalent to 1/2. Some of you may have automatically known 2/4 is equivalent to 1/2, but again, I want to make sure you can do the work that goes with it. All right, and that's the end of our warm-up. Make sure you're looking at the quizzes, answering the questions in the quizzes for the warm-up, and then we can move on to our middle portion of the lesson.